Actually, your voice was terribly broken. I hope it's not a problem at my end. Okay, so do you see Laplace transform at your end?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, okay, all right, excellent. Okay, so continuing from where we left last time, we will start our discussion on Laplace transforms today. So let's see, what do we mean by a Laplace transform? So let f be a real valued function defined on positive reals. Then the Laplace transform of the function f, denoted as LF, is defined as follows. Yeah. Okay. So it's a certain improper integral. So I'm integrating 0 to infinity exponential minus ft dt. Yeah. So, many things here. The first thing is the following. Yeah. So it's important to keep in mind that the variable of integration here is the variable t. Yeah. While s is a parameter independent of t, right? So what is the Laplace transform doing? The Laplace transform of a function little f can be viewed as an operator L that transforms the function little f, which is a function of the variable t, yeah, into capital F, which is a function of the variable s. Yeah, so writing the Laplace transform of the function little f, so LF, by denoting it by capital F, what is this transform doing? This is transforming the function from the t domain to s domain. Yeah. So one should ask, where is this Laplace transform defined? So
Ma'am,
yes, please.
we hadn't completed improper integrals. We had
Yeah,
just
so
done
no, I did say, improper integrals, you are required to sort of read it on your own.
even of the second kind and gamma function and all of that.
See, we'll see a little bit of that. We will see a gamma functions and things like that. But the definitions of improper integral of first kind, second kind, and third kind, I would like all of you to read it on your own. There's not much
Okay,
there.
right,
Yeah,
right.
it's just the
Okay,
definition.
sure, sure.
There's not
Yeah, yeah.
much there,
It's
right?
not much. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So what is to be noted here is that this definition is to be interpreted for all those values of x, all those values of little s for which the improper integral converges. Yeah. And the above improper integral may not converge for every s. Yeah. So whenever it converges, the Laplace transform is defined. We will see examples of what happens. But I hope the definition is okay with everybody present here. But one should ask, why are we sort of suddenly bothered about Laplace transform? How are they related with differential equations, and do they actually provide merely an alternative procedure to solving differential equations, or this method of Laplace transform is in some way better than what is known? Yeah, so we will sort of answer each of these questions in due course of time. uh, let's see. So let's start with a very basic example. Suppose I want to consider this constant function. F is identically 1 everywhere. Then what is the Laplace transform of this function? So by definition, it is this improper integral. Yeah. So I am going to, so this is the integral transform. If you know what is an integral transform, if you don't bother about it. So by definition, the Laplace transform of this function is this integral. Now one just integrates it, and what do you get? This is 1 by s. Yeah. And so I'm going to say that the Laplace transform of this function is 1 by s for all s bigger than 0, right? Okay. All right. Let's consider another function. Let's consider t going to exponential at, where a is some fixed real number. Okay. All right. So by definition, the Laplace transform of this function would be the integral exponential minus xt exponential at, right, from 0 to infinity. So this is the same as exponential of a minus s t. One can integrate that, and if this calculation is correct, the Laplace transform of this function turns out to be reciprocal of s minus a. Yeah. And this makes, all of this is defined for s bigger than a. Yeah. So you understand, right? Where is this assumption of s bigger than 0 and s bigger than a coming in? Yeah, we actually use this when we sort of plug in the limits 0 to infinity, both in example 1 and example 2. Okay, I think these are some basic examples. Let's see. What is the Laplace transform of the sine function? So I have a sine at here. A is some real constant. So let's see. So suppose that s is positive, then the Laplace transform of sine of at is this improper integral 0 to infinity exponential minus st sine at dt. Now, how would you compute this? By definition, this improper integral is allowing the limit to b to tend to infinity and compute the integral from 0 to b, yeah, whenever this exists. Okay, and how I'm going to compute this? I'm going to apply integration by parts. Yeah, so this is going to be 1 integral of 2 minus integral of derivative of 1 times integral of 2. Correct? So you see, we are using the fact here that s is assumed to be positive when I plug in this limits t equal to b and t equal to 0. So that would allow me to write 1 by a, and this the integral term is written as it is here, right? And now what am I going to do? I'm going to apply integration by parts one more time, so that what I get here is the integral of 0 to infinity exponential minus st sine of at. But this is exactly the Laplace transform of sine of at, right? So which means that the Laplace transform of the sine of at function is given as a by s square plus a square, and this is valid whenever s is bigger than 0. All right. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, so these are some basic examples that we are computing. Once we have, sort of many examples in our hand, then we will see how to actually apply Laplace transform to solve ordinary differential equations.
Ma'am,
Yes.
why we consider s greater than 0 in our second last line?
Here, see how when you use, see if you look at this limit, a limit b tending to infinity minus of exponential minus st cosine at by a, right? So you're going to plug in, yeah. So you're going to use here that
Yes.
s is positive, right?
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Only then this is going, right? Otherwise, how do you get rid of this here?
Okay.
S is bigger than 0. Make sure that all of this runs fine, right?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. All right. So, very similar to this, I would like all of you to compute the Laplace transform of the cosine at function, cos hyperbolic at function, and sine hyperbolic at function. Yeah. And find out where is this valid, right? For what values of s this is valid. The answers are here if these computations are correct. Yeah. So please check each of these. Okay. All right. So let's see. Let's make a small detour to the gamma function, and hopefully I'll be able to justify in a couple of minutes why do we sort of suddenly care about the gamma function. Okay. What is the gamma function? So this is defined by a certain improper integral. What is this? Gamma of y is this improper integral 0 to infinity exponential minus of x to the power y minus 1 dx. Okay. Now the first thing is, does this integral converge? All right. So let's see. So I'm going to split this integral as the right hand side from 0 to 1 plus the integral from 1 to infinity. Now the first integral, let's see. What happens to the first integral here? Okay, let's look at the first integral. For the first integral, let's observe this inequality. I claim that the exponential, this integrand, exponential of minus x to the power y minus 1 always satisfies this inequality. This is going to be at most x to the power y minus 1. Yeah, so I'm using the fact here that x is between 0 and 1. Correct? So if this inequality is true, then the first integral is at most 1 by y and we are fine. Correct? Now, why does the second integral converge? The second integral converges because of a certain comparison test. Yeah, so this is, I think, in the slides on the previous lecture. when we discuss the examples on improper integrals, this example is very well sort of illustrated there, that you appeal to a certain so this is much like, you know, you use comparison test for infinite series or sequences to converge. So you bound it by something which converges, and it turns out this one converges. Yeah. So this is in the previous slide. I'll skip it for here for the sort of not do it repeat the arguments here. So if that is all taken care of, then this gamma function, this improper integral, converges as long as y is strictly positive and 1 is fine. Okay, all right. Okay, then what? What do we do with this gamma function? Let's see. The nice part about the gamma function is the following equation. It so turns out that gamma of y plus 1 is the same as y times gamma of y, and this holds for every y which is strictly positive. Okay, let's quickly see the proof of this before we see how does it actually simplify life. Okay, so let's fix a and b, both positive real numbers, a less than b, and let's look at the following integral. Integral a to b exponential minus x to the power y dx. Okay, all right. So in the end, what am I going to do? I'm going to allow, you know, limits a tends to 0 and b tends to infinity, right? So this will be exactly gamma of y plus 1 is what I'm looking at. All right. So this is, let's apply integration by parts. So this would be 1 integral of 2 minus derivative of 1 integral of 2, right? So minus integral of derivative of 1 integral of 2. Okay. All right. So if I plug in the limits, this is exactly, yeah, a to power y exponential minus a minus b to power y exponential minus b plus y times a certain integral. Okay. Now what are we going to do? I am going to allow a to tend to 0 and b to tend to infinity, right? Because I am looking at the gamma function. I'm interested in looking at the gamma function. So if I do that, then the left hand side is exactly the gamma function of y plus 1, right? And the right hand side, this integral is exactly the gamma function of y. And what happens to the term a to power y exponential minus a minus b to power y exponential minus b?
Zero.
This goes to 0, right? Okay. So this allows us to conclude that for all positive y, gamma satisfies this equation, that gamma of y plus 1 is y times gamma of y. Now this is nice. For example, if n is a positive integer, then what does this say? This says that gamma of n plus 1 is n times gamma of n, right? And you apply the same equation recursively. So that will tell you that gamma of n plus 1 is the factorial n, right? And you know, one can also use induction to verify this equation. So gamma function provides an interpolation to the factorial function. One can actually evaluate it for each positive integer. Okay, very good, nice. But how is this related to ODEs? Let's see. So we bring in gamma function here. And why do we certainly care about this improper integral? Let's see. So let's do this small exercise. The claim is the following, that the integral of exponential minus x square 0 to infinity with respect to the x variable is converges, and it's actually, one can evaluate it to be root pi by 2. All right. Let's see. The very first thing is the following, that why does this improper integral converge? Okay, so let's make this observation. Note that the integrand here, exponential minus x square, is continuous for every x, right? So there is no problem in the integral from 0 to 1, exponential minus x square dx. This is a nice integral. Okay. Now the problem is when you look at this function exponential minus x square and integrate from 1 to infinity. Okay. So, but however, when x is between minus and 1 to infinity, I claim that exponential minus x square is always dominated by exponential of minus x, right? And you know, this is again the comparison test. So that means that the integrals will also satisfy the same inequality, which means that the integral 1 to infinity exponential minus x squared dx converges. And how do I evaluate this? I'm going to use the following thing, right? So I'm going to write I as the integral 0 to infinity exponential minus x squared dx. This is the same as integral 0 to infinity exponential minus y squared dy. Yeah, so I'm just using a different variable of integration, nothing changes, right? Now, so that means that I square is going to be this double integral. Integral 0 to infinity exponential minus of x square plus y square dx dy, right? And how do I compute this double integral? I'm going to change to polar coordinates, right? Yeah, so I'm going to write down this instead of xy, I'm going to write down this double integral in r theta
R
coordinates.
dr theta.
Yeah,
Yes.
r theta coordinates, and that will help me. If you just follow the computation, you will get to this. Yeah. So is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Now, why do I care about gamma function and this obscure improper integral? I hope I'll be able to justify that. So let's see. Before that, let's evaluate gamma function for at points 1/2, 3/2, and 5/2. Yeah. So by definition, gamma of 1/2 is this integral 0 to infinity exponential minus x. So y here is half x to power minus half dx. Okay. How do I evaluate this? I'm going to substitute uh, x as t square, which means that this integral now takes the form 0 to infinity exponential minus t square dt, right? Which we just computed on the previous slide. So this will allow me to write down gamma of 1/2 as square root of pi. Correct? Is that okay? Everybody with me up till this point?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. Now, having found this, now I can use the functional equation, right? To write down gamma of 3/2, gamma of 5/2, and all of that. Correct? Yeah, I'm going to use the fact that gamma of y plus 1 is y times gamma of y. All right. Okay, all right. Now, how is all of this related to what we are discussing? The common link is the following example. All right. So let's try to evaluate the Laplace transform of the function t to power p. All right. So this is by definition this improper integral 0 to infinity exponential minus st t to power t dt. All right. So I'm going to introduce this new variable here x, and I'm going to say let's plug in st as x. Okay, which means that dt is dx by s, which means that the Laplace transform of tp at s is going to be exponential minus x by s to the power p dx by s, right? And the limits of integration remain the same. Okay, so this is exactly 1 upon s to power p plus 1. And what is this? This is a certain gamma function, right? Yeah, gamma function evaluated at p plus 1. Is that correct? Yes. And when does this make sense? This makes sense when p plus 1 is positive, which is why I have p is at least minus 1. All right. Yeah. Is that okay?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. All right. Okay. So in particular, if p is a positive integer, then Laplace transform of t to power n is gamma of n plus 1, which is factorial n, right? By s to power n plus 1, right? Okay, all right. One can also compute, using the information about the gamma function, the Laplace transform of the function t minus half, t to power, t half, and so on, right? Okay, and what will we do with this Laplace transform? We will see in in another few minutes at how is this useful, the method of Laplace transforms. Okay, so I hope everybody is.
Ma'am,
Yes, please.
ma'am, we write gamma of y plus 1 is equal to y times gamma of y, right?
Correct.
So in this case, we are, while writing 0 to infinity e to the power minus x, x to the power p, we are calling that as gamma function, right? So we should write gamma of y plus 1 upon y, right? So where's that y here?
See, by definition, gamma function is exponential minus x, x to the power y minus 1 here.
Yes, ma'am.
Y, yeah, so that y minus 1 here would come as y plus 1 here, right? Just this is just the definition of gamma function, nothing else. I'm not using the functional equation here, just the definition of the gamma function.
Right, ma'am. But ma'am, upon 1 by p should also come here. That's my point.
See, 1 by p will not come here. See, remember, what is the definition of the gamma function? I'll just go back to that slide so that you can see. Here it is. See, gamma of y, if you were considering gamma of y, then the y figures here, your y minus 1. Over there, it is x to power p. So p will be replaced by, so you will have a p plus 1 here. That's all, nothing else.
Okay.
Yeah,
My
it's just
bad.
the definition. That's all.
Yeah.
Nothing else. We are not using the functional equation there. Yeah, just the definition. Okay. So where were we? Here. Okay. All right. So, having computed this Laplace transform of some elementary function, one should ask, we may sort of go on about Laplace transform, but is it even defined? And under what conditions on the function f does this improper integral converge? Okay. So remember, last time towards the end of our class, we defined what is a piecewise continuous function, right? Let's recall, when do we say a function f is piecewise continuous on an interval a, b? If it is continuous everywhere except for finite number of discontinuities, and each of these discontinuity is a jump discontinuity. Yeah, what does it mean? It means that, one can find a partition of the interval a, b, and that divides the interval ab into finitely many subintervals, and f approaches a finite limit as the endpoints of each subinterval are approached from within the subinterval. Yeah, so okay, all right. Now I'm going to introduce one more definition which is needed in order to sort of justify the existence of Laplace transform, which is the following. So we say that a piecewise continuous function has exponential order if the following is true. Yeah, so the function is assumed to be defined and piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to infinity. So we say that there are constants a, k, m such that the absolute value of ft is at most some constant k times exponential of at. Yeah, so we demand that k and m are positive, and this inequality is satisfies for all t bigger than m, and a is some fixed real number. Yeah, so this is sort of a growth restriction, right? We are saying how does the function behave as t tends to infinity, right? This is so f satisfies this inequality after some stage m, right? Okay, now one should ask, what are those functions which satisfy this condition? Yeah. Are there any functions which are of exponential order? If at all, what are examples and non-examples, right? So let's see. Okay, so this is the definition of exponential order revisited. Let's start with very simple example. Suppose that f is such that f satisfies the following inequality. Yeah, so mod of f is bounded by k for all t bigger than m, where m is some fixed positive real number. Then evidently f is of exponential order, correct? Is that okay? Yes, a would be 0, right? Okay. Let's take one more example. Let's consider the cosine hyperbolic function. Yeah, remember this is by definition exponential t plus exponential minus of t by 2. Yeah, clearly this is at most exponential t, and this is true everywhere for all t. So this tells you that cosine hyperbolic t is of exponential order, right? Okay, all right. Let's take one more example. Let's consider t to power n. Yeah, t to power n, where n is some fixed natural number. This satisfies the inequality factorial n exponential t. Yeah. So what is it saying? That t to power n for each fixed n is of exponential order. In fact, this allows us to conclude that all polynomials are of exponential order. Correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. Let's see. Now let's see a non-example. I claim that if one consider the function exponential t square, then this is not of exponential order, right? So as t tends to infinity, this function increases faster than k times exponential at, regardless of how large the constants k and a may be.
Ma'am, how are we saying this?
So how do we sort of justify this? Let me write this. Yeah. So I am looking at this function, right? So this function t going to exponential t square, right? I claim that this function is not of exponential order. Yeah. So you can justify it by, let's compute the following limit. Yeah. So I have an exponential t square and I'm going to divide this by, so fix some constant a and some constant k. So this limit is going to be positive infinite. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yes. So this is saying that exponential t square is bigger than k times exponential at for all t large, and for all choices of the constant k, and for all choices of the constant a, right? This is true no matter what k and a are. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So what is this saying? This is saying that this function exponential t square, um, what happens to this function? As t tends to positive infinite, this function increases faster than k times exponential at, regardless of how large the constants k and a may be, right? So this is exactly saying that this function cannot be of exponential order. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, is everybody with me? Okay, let's just go back to the slide. Okay. All
I
right.
had a doubt in the polynomial part.
Yes,
So
please. Yes, please.
we said that over here k should be some constant, but
Yes.
it's n factorial. So as n increases, it also increases. So there's no upper bound to it. So
No, but n is fixed, right? N is fixed. And polynomial is going to be finitely, they're going to be finitely many monomials,
okay, n is fixed. Okay, fine.
right? When you fix a polynomial, the degree is fixed, right? And they're going to be finitely many terms. You just take the
Okay,
maximum
got
of
it.
those, right? The point is that k is independent of t. Correct? Yes. So this is fine, right? Let's take one more example. That sum of functions of exponential order is also going to lead us functions of exponential order. Does everybody agree? Yeah, that this is saying that if f and g are of exponential order, then f plus g is also going to be of exponential order. Correct? Yes, is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, everybody with me? Okay, all right. Now, what is the point of introducing this term of exponential order? This is because of the following theorem. Suppose that f is piecewise continuous on every interval 0 to alpha for every alpha positive. And suppose that f is of exponential order, which means that there are some constants k, a, and m such that the absolute value of f is no bigger than k times exponential at whenever t is bigger than m. And this is, this is true for some fixed constant a and for all, and some fixed constant k, right? All right. Then what is known as that the Laplace transform of the function f exists for all s bigger than a. So if little f is piecewise continuous on the interval 0 alpha for every alpha positive, and if f is known to be of exponential order, then the Laplace transform of the function f is guaranteed to exist for all s bigger than this constant little a here. Yeah, so that's the role that little a plays. Yeah.
Ma'am, but
Yes, yes.
even our s is another variable, right? In another domain.
Yes, yes.
So how are we comparing S and A? I did not get that.
See, S is a variable, right? But it still varies on the real numbers. A is some fixed real number.
Okay, okay.
And we are saying that Laplace transform of F exists whenever S is to the right of A. That's all. A is fixed. Little a is fixed.
And wouldn't we also require A to be the infimum of all the possible A's?
Yeah, you can sort of fine tune all of that argument, but for the moment what we are interested in the existence of the Laplace transform for some S, some values of S.
Okay.
Right, you can fine tune depending on each case, right? Best possible A and all of that, right? One can do that, but let's see. Yeah, so is the statement of the theorem okay with everybody present here? Yeah, this is about existence of Laplace transform. Yeah, remember Laplace transform is some improper integral which we said that it would converge for some values of S we don't know, and we sort of interpret the Laplace transform for those values of S for which the improper integral converges. Now this is saying here we have some concrete assumption that if F is piecewise continuous somewhere and if F is of exponential order, then the Laplace transform is guaranteed to exist for some values of S. Okay, all right. How do we justify this theorem? Let's see the proof. So by definition, the Laplace transform of the function little f is this improper integral. I'm going to split it up as integral from 0 to m and from m to infinity. Yeah, I'm doing this because I know certain estimates on f hold when we are beyond the stage capital M. Okay, all right. Now, on the interval 0 to m, f is piecewise continuous by assumption, right? So there's no problem at all, right? So this integral exists, right? There's no problem. So we will focus our energy on the integral m to infinity, and we will try to justify that that integral converges. Okay. Now let's see, how do we do that? So when t is bigger than m, let's look at the integrand, which is exponential minus exponential minus st times f evaluated at t in absolute values. This is going to be dominated by exponential minus of st k times exponential at by assumption, right? We assume that f is of exponential order. Now this is exactly k times exponential minus of s minus at. All right. So, we know this, right? That if I take the integral as m to infinity, then this integral exponential minus of s minus at would converge if s is bigger than a, right? So by comparison test for the improper integral, which was sort of not discussed but sort of handed out to you last time, one could interpret that this integral m to infinity absolute value of exponential minus st ft converges. Okay, and this would allow that the same integral without the absolute values will also converge, right? Why is this the case?
Because the second one is always less than the first one.
Right. So this is also true. This is true for general Riemann integral, but here we are talking
Yes.
of integrals from m to infinity. This continues to be hold true for improper integrals whenever they are convergent, and this was also stated in the
In the previous,
yeah,
yes.
right, in
Right.
the sort of notes on improper integrals. So one can do that, right? So anyways, the upshot of all of this discussion is that if f is piecewise continuous on interval 0 to alpha for every alpha positive and f is of exponential order, then Laplace transform of f exists. Yeah? So in fact, this assumption here is said to be little f is of exponential order a. Yeah. So if little f is of exponential order a, then the Laplace transform of f exists for s bigger than a, right? That's how we see this. Okay. I would also like to point out, at this point of time, this is not an if and only if condition. It's not that if the Laplace transform exists, then the function has to be of exponential order. F may have a Laplace transform, even though f may not be of exponential order, and there are examples known. Okay, but this is a sufficient condition. If this happens, then the Laplace transform exists. Okay, all right. What next? Before we make any further progress, let's just note down this very important property of Laplace transform, which is about linearity. Yeah? So suppose f and g be two functions such that the Laplace transform of f and g exist for s bigger than a1 and s bigger than a2 respectively, right? Then one can talk about the function, a linear combination of f and g, c1f plus c2g, right? And consider the Laplace transform of this function. One can show that the Laplace transform of the function c1 times f plus c2 times g, where c1 and c2 are some arbitrary real numbers, exists, converges, and is equal to c1 times Laplace transform of f plus c2 times Laplace transform of g, and this holds for all s bigger than the maximum of a1 and a2, right? So this is certain linearity property of the Laplace transform, right? Okay. So let's just quickly see the proof. Let's fix s bigger than a maximum of a1 and a2. Then by definition, if one has to consider the Laplace transform of the function c1 times f plus c2 times g, then you look at the following improper integral, right? 0 to infinity exponential minus st c1 times f plus c2 times g t dt. Okay, I'm going to write this as the following two integrals, exponential minus st c1 times ft plus exponential minus st c2 times gt. So this is exactly c1 times the Laplace transform of s and c2 times the Laplace transform of g, right? So all you sort of need to do to prove this statement is to write down, but the conclusion is quite important, that Laplace transform actually acts linearly on the sum of these functions. All right. So I hope everybody is with me up till this point.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. Okay. See, this property is going to be very, very useful when we in a little while, yeah, when we actually apply Laplace transform to solve ODE, but let's go on for the moment. Okay, now here is another very, very important property. Suppose that f and g are two continuous functions, yeah, such that, so I've written here two improper integrals, these converge for some s, yeah. So this is the Laplace transform for f and the Laplace transform for g, right? These converge for some, so these exist for some s. That's what this is saying. And furthermore, we know that the Laplace transform of f and the Laplace transform of g are the same for all s for which the two integrals converge. Then one can show that the functions f and g must be the same. Yeah, I will sort of pause for a minute for you to absorb this theorem.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
I had this doubt. Suppose if converges for say 3 values of s and g converges for 2 values of s. Now, for the 2 values of s that are common between f and g, they are equal, but it might be that s can also converge for a third value of s. F can also converge for a third value of s that g doesn't converge.
F means f converges means you want to say the Laplace transform of f converges
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
Laplace transform of g converges.
Yeah. So my question, let me phrase it a bit more clearly. So it's told that Laplace transform of f of s and Laplace transform of g of s converge for some s, right?
Yeah,
Now,
some s means, all I want to say is, you know, some s means the first integral, let's say, converges for s bigger than alpha 1. The second integral converges for s bigger than alpha 2. Right? So the Laplace transform of f and g would agree for s bigger than maximum of alpha 1 and alpha 2. Right?
Okay, so
right?
between
right.
alpha 1 and alpha 2, we can't say that they are equal, right?
We can't say, you know, the one of them doesn't even exist. So there's no point of, you know, talking about them being equal. Right? One of them doesn't even exist between alpha 1 and alpha 2.
Yeah, okay, but over here we are told that ft equals gt for all t greater than 0.
Correct.
So how would this condition change when f converges from for greater than alpha 1 and g converges for s greater than alpha 2? I mean, there is a set where f converges and g
Correct, correct.
doesn't.
So it looks like something mysterious is going on. Yeah. So it is, yeah, quite mysterious going on. But no, I would not sort of rather skip the proof, which is sort of beyond the scope of MA 108. I can point out a reference, actually a paper where this is being done. What is important to note here, which is what I would like to emphasize here, is that unlike the definition, well, not the definition, unlike, so far we have been saying that Laplace transform exists, if the function is piecewise continuous somewhere
Yeah,
and
yeah.
of exponential order. Over here, we are assuming f and g to be continuous. See, f and g, if they are just piecewise continuous, then the Laplace transform of the functions, two functions may agree everywhere, but at, everywhere, because these are integrals which may agree, and the functions actually may be distinct.
Yeah.
Right. But over here, the functions are continuous to start off with. Yes. Yeah, please mute yourself. Okay. Yeah, so everybody agrees with me, right, that if f and g were just just piecewise continuous function, then one can construct simple counter examples where this result fails to hold true. So one actually works with continuous function. Yeah, this is attributed to Lurch, and this is called as Lurch's cancellation law. This is actually very, very useful when we sort of look at something called as inverse Laplace transform. But I will sort of we will discuss inverse transform a little later, not now. Yeah. So is this statement okay?
Ma'am, I had just one another curiosity. It's not
Yes.
directly related to this material,
Hmm.
but it's like I saw on Wikipedia that Laplace transform was discovered before Fourier transform, and like, but Laplace transform seemed to be a general case of Fourier transform, right? So like, it shocked me kind of.
See, that's the genius of Laplace and Fourier, meaning I am nobody to comment upon it. Really. Really, yeah. I really cannot comment upon it. Okay, let's go ahead. Okay. See, in order to solve some meaningful examples, we must consider the following. Yeah, how is the Laplace transform of the derivative of f related to the Laplace transform of f, right? And how is the Laplace transform of the integral of f related to the Laplace transform of f, right? Once we sort of are comfortable with these things, we would be able to solve some examples. So let's see. So, any point time of any, one should understand, what does it sort of involve to consider the Laplace transform of the derivative of f. One, this should be defined, right? And when is this defined? Similarly, when is the Laplace transform of the integral of f defined? Because these are all of these are improper integrals, right? So, and once they are defined, are they related to the Laplace transform of f, right? So let's take each of them one by one. So here is a theorem which gives us a relation between the Laplace transform of f and the Laplace transform of the derivative of f. So suppose that f is continuous on the interval 0 to a for every a positive, and the derivative of f is assumed to be piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to a for every a positive. Okay, all right. Suppose that f is of exponential order alpha, yeah, which means that there are some constants k alpha m such that the absolute value of f is bounded above by some constant k exponential alpha t whenever t is bigger than m. Okay, then the Laplace transform of the derivative of f exists for all s bigger than alpha. And in fact, one can write down the Laplace transform of the derivative of f in terms of the Laplace transform of f. And the exact relation is as follows. The Laplace transform of the derivative of f is s times the Laplace transform of f minus the function f evaluated at 0, right? See, there are several things to be noted here, right? One, the first thing is, if we were to start with the Laplace transform of the derivative of f, we would, our theorem tells us we would require the derivative of f to be piecewise continuous somewhere, which is there in the assumption of this theorem also. And we would require the derivative of f to be of exponential order. That's not the assumption here. See, this theorem, in this theorem, we do not assume the derivative of f to be of exponential order to start off with, right? That's the first thing to note, right? And even then, we claim that the Laplace transform of the derivative of f exists, right? Okay. So I'll give you an example. Let's look at this example. Let's look at a sine of exponential t square. This example satisfies the condition of this theorem. F here is continuous, the derivative of f is piecewise continuous, and the function f is of exponential order. But if you look at the derivative of f, for this example, the derivative of f is not of exponential order. Sine of exponential t square, what is going to be the derivative? That's going to have an exponential t square term, right? That's not going to be of exponential order. So one can apply this theorem to functions like sine of exponential t square, and one can write down the Laplace transform of the derivative of sine of exponential t square in terms of the Laplace transform of sine of exponential t square. Is that okay? Is this bit okay with everybody present here?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So if that's the case, let's see the proof. Okay. So what are we required to do? Let's recall. We are required to first show that the Laplace transform of the derivative of f exists, and two, find a functional equation, find a formula for the Laplace transform of f in terms of the Laplace transform of f. Okay. So let's consider the interval 0a. By assumption, the derivative of f is piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to a. Yeah? So it means that it is continuous everywhere except finitely many points where derivative of f has jumped discontinuities. So I'm going to label these finitely many discontinuities as t1, t2, tn. So each of these points are between the interval 0 to a. T0 is 0 and tn plus 1 is a. Yeah? That's the notation. And I'm going to consider this integral 0 to a exponential minus st derivative of f evaluate t dt. Yeah? So in the end, I would like to see what happens as I allow a to tend to infinity. Yeah? That would give me the Laplace transform of the function f prime. Okay. So I'm going to split this integral as integral from 0 to t1, t1 to t2, t2 to t3, all the way tn to tn plus 1, which is a. Okay. Now in each of these intervals 0 to t1, t1, t2, tna, one is going to integration by parts. So if I apply integration by parts, I'm going to take exponential minus t as the second term. Well, the first term, and this one as the second term, right? So 1 integral of 2 minus integral of derivative of 1 integral of 2, right? So this is going to give me exponential minus st integral of derivative of ft, which is ft evaluated at ti minus 1 minus derivative of 1 integral of 2, and there's again a minus sign, so that becomes a plus. Correct? Okay. So let's plug this in and you sum it up. Yeah. So this is exponential minus sa fa minus f0, and the second term here becomes the integral 0 to a exponential minus stft, right? And now what am I going to do? I'm going to allow a to tend to infinity. So if I do that, what is the left hand side? The left hand side is exactly the Laplace transform of the derivative of f. And the right hand side, this term is exactly s times the Laplace transform of f. And so this term does not survive. And I say that this is true for s bigger than alpha. Now where did we use this condition that s is bigger than alpha here?
And that Laplace, the Laplace transform should exist. So for that condition, we used s is greater than alpha.
Okay, and how did we say that this term will, drop out? How do we take care of this term? Exponential minus of sa f evaluated a. Why should this go to 0 as a tends to infinity?
Ma'am, because f of a is is a converging sequence.
So there's no
No,
sequence
no,
here.
no, no,
F
no.
of A is just a number, right? There's no sequence here.
A tends to infinity.
A tends to infinity. So nevertheless, but we know what happens to this exponential minus SAFA.
Okay, so ma'am, e to the power minus SA fa can be written as lesser than equals to e to the power minus SA into KL e to the power alpha a.
Right. So we are
And-
using the fact here that what that f is
bounded.
let me just put it down. Not bounded. We are using the fact that f is of exponential order.
Is it called bounded by a function or something like that? That it is lesser than a function, or I am using the wrong notation, not the wrong word.
They're not bounded by a function. This is big O notation. I don't want to use that term, big O notation, if you have, but that's being rigorously used here, right? So anyways, so how do I justify what is I am trying to tell you? E to power minus SAFA goes to 0 as A tends to infinity whenever S is bigger than alpha. I'm trying to say that this is being used here. Yeah. So you remember F is of exponential order, right? By assumption, right? So what does that mean? Recall that F satisfies this, right? This is Ka exponential alpha t. This is true for all t bigger than m, right? And for some k and for some fixed alpha, right? Okay. And so let's see. So in particular, I'm going to allow A to tend to infinity, right? So if A is bigger than this fixed constant M, then one can appeal to this estimate above, right? The absolute value of F at the point A is going to be K times exponential alpha A. Is that correct? Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, which means that, and what am I interested in? We are interested in exponential minus SA f of A. Yeah, so this is going to be bounded by K times exponential minus of S minus alpha. Correct? A. Right? And now as A tends to infinity, this term goes to 0 whenever S is bigger than alpha. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes? So that's how this S is bigger than alpha comes in here. Is that okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Yeah, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So, you know, this is telling you how is the Laplace transform of the derivative of f related to the Laplace transform of the function f. Right? So let me ask you another question here. Where did we use the fact that the function little f is continuous? Right? See, the assumption has that f is continuous. We certainly use this part. We certainly use this assumption. Right? Where did we use the fact that little f is continuous?
Ma'am, the integration by parts, right?
Okay, so if the integration by parts, where did we use
We
f?
directly wrote FA at F0
Sorry?
in the first summation.
In the first summation, meaning over here, yes.
So we can only write when F is continuous.
What can we write when f is continuous?
That if this first summation is equals to e to the power minus SA
Correct,
FA
correct,
minus.
correct. Okay, all right, very nice. Okay, all right. Okay, so is this bit okay with everybody present here? Everybody with me up till this point?
Ma'am, can you explain what happened to that integration S0 to A e to the power minus S?
This one, the second term here,
Yes.
S integral 0 to A. See, I am going to allow A to tend to infinity. So this integral is exactly Laplace transform of F.
Oh,
Integral 0 to infinity exponential minus st ft dt is exactly Laplace transform of F. So that appears here. S times the Laplace transform of F.
yes, ma'am. And
Minus of F0 as it is. This term goes to 0. And the left hand side is exactly the Laplace transform of the derivative of F.
oh, yes.
Yeah, is that okay?
Okay.
All right. Uh, so if this theorem is fine, then one can actually apply this theorem as many times as one wants. That means to as many derivatives of f as possible, provided the hypothesis is satisfied. So this is an immediate corollary. Suppose that all possible derivatives of f up to order n minus 1 are continuous on the interval 0 to a for all a positive, and the nth derivative of f is piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to a. Suppose that all possible derivatives of f up to order n minus 1 are of exponential order alpha. Remember, this alpha is the same for all possible derivatives of f up to order n minus 1. Then the Laplace transform of the nth derivative of f exists for all s bigger than alpha, and one can write down the Laplace transform of the nth derivative of f in terms of the Laplace transform of f. And it turns out that the exact relation is the following. The Laplace transform of the nth derivative of f is s to the power n, the Laplace transform of f minus s to power n minus 1, f evaluated at 0 minus s to power n minus 2, the derivative of f at 0, all the way minus s, the n minus 2th derivative of f evaluated at 0, minus n minus 1th derivative of f evaluated 0. Yeah? So there's a Laplace transform of f, and all of these are, the derivatives of f evaluated at a fixed point, namely 0 in this case. Right? So this corollary actually banks on the previous theorem. So at each stage, all you have to do is to check that the conditions, the hypothesis of the theorem is satisfied. Right? Okay. So let's
Ma'am?
just, yes, please.
Ma'am, here, so alpha and k can vary for each f of I of t, right?
No, it's the same k and the same alpha. See, k
Oh.
doesn't matter because these are finitely many. You can take the maximum of those, right? They're finitely many derivatives.
Yeah.
You just take the maximum of those. Alpha is the same.
Okay.
It's the same alpha. Each of these derivative of f is of exponential order alpha, same alpha.
Except for the last one, right?
Which
Last
one?
derivative needn't be.
Last mean the nth derivative.
Yes, yes.
See, the nth derivative need not be even of exponential order. We don't even demand that condition here. Yeah, the hypothesis doesn't demand anything about the nth derivative of f.
We saw
All
the
it
example
requires-
of sine. Yeah.
Yes. The nth derivative is just required to be piecewise continuous. The topmost.
And why is the point 0? I mean, because the f of 0, what is the significance of that?
See, 0 turns up because, we just go back to this example, right? Because we are evaluating an integral from 0 to infinity, right?
0
so,
to a.
yeah, so this term drops out and 0 comes in here. Yeah, that's the point. That's built in the definition
Right,
of
okay,
Laplace transform. That's all. The Laplace
Correct.
transform is the
Correct,
integral
okay.
from 0 to infinity. That's all.
Right.
Okay, all right. So what we proved was actually for n equal to 1. The previous theorem was this statement of this corollary, meaning this corollary is all right. So I am going to apply what the principle of mathematical induction to establish this corollary. And I'm going to emphasize here that n equal to 1 case is done. That's the statement of the theorem, right? We're going to assume that this corollary is true for, let's say, index n minus 1, and try to apply induction hypothesis to prove that this is true for index n. So that will say that this is true for all n, right? Okay, so let's just see the proof. So let's assume that the result is true for n minus 1. So let's try to establish that this is true for index n. So that means that let's consider the Laplace transform of the nth derivative of f, which means that I'm going to write down this as, consider this function g, which is the n minus 1th derivative of f. So this is the Laplace transform of the first derivative of g, right? And I'm going to write down, so how does this second equation comes? This comes from the theorem that we discussed, right? So the Laplace transform of the derivative of g is s times the Laplace transform of the function g minus g evaluated at 0, correct? All right. And now induction hypothesis will tell me how does the Laplace transform of the n minus 1th derivative of f related to the Laplace transform of f, and that's all. We are done. Correct? Is that okay? See the proof, there's nothing here. All you need to do is be careful about when you're applying the corollary. You need to be sure about that all the hypothesis is being satisfied. Is this,
Ma'am,
yes.
in this slide, we can find alpha as we find k, that we find the greatest k as we find
Correct. One can do that. Right.
for alpha as well, right?
Sure.
Okay.
But you sort of see all of this is saying this following, right? At each point, when you, so this is saying that the Laplace transform of the ith derivative of f will exist for s bigger than alpha, right? And you want the same statement to true here, right? So there are various Laplace transform that exists,
Okay. Yeah.
right?
Yes.
So all of that goes in here. Okay, all right. Oh, finally we will be able to see an example. Okay, let's see. So let's solve this initial value problem using Laplace transform. Now you would wonder, what on earth do we achieve by using Laplace transform? We already know how to solve this initial value problem. Let's see. Yeah, let's solve this example, and then maybe I'll try to justify. Okay. So what am I going to do? Let's take the Laplace transform of the terms in the following differential equation, right? Which means I will get the following. See, how do I write this left hand side here? I am going to use the fact that the Laplace transform is linear. Yeah? So the Laplace transform of y double prime minus y prime minus 2y is the same as the Laplace transform of y double prime minus the Laplace transform of y prime minus 2 times the Laplace transform of y. That's the first thing that's being used here. Okay. And now we are going to say that, assume that there is a solution y to the initial value problem which satisfies all the conditions of the corollary that we just discussed, which means that the topmost derivative, which means y double prime, the second derivative of y, is piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to a for all a positive, and the function in y and the first derivative of y are of exponential order alpha, right? If that is the case, then I can apply the corollary, which means that I can say that the Laplace transform of the second derivative of y can be written in terms of the Laplace transform of y. And similarly, the Laplace transform of the first derivative of y can be written in terms of the Laplace transform of y. Okay, so if I do that, the first quantity here becomes s square Laplace transform of y minus s y evaluated 0 minus the derivative of y at 0. And now again, I'm writing the Laplace transform of the first derivative of y in terms of the Laplace transform of y, which means that this term here is s times Laplace transform of y minus y evaluated 0 minus 2 times Laplace transform of y equals 0. All right. Okay. And I'm going to, club these terms. So what is this saying? So the method of Laplace transform has transformed an initial value problem for a constant coefficient equation into an algebraic equation. Now, see, these are all polynomials here. Yeah. The solution of this algebraic equation can be used to solve the initial value problem, right? So let me use this opportunity to also say that in some cases, this method is merely an alternative procedure for solving problems that can be solved equally well by methods that were considered previously. However, in some cases, there are cases where the method of Laplace transform is more efficient than the methods previously discussed. And hopefully we will discuss some of them, right? Okay, so we have actually not solved this. I'm just making claims. Okay, so what is this that we have done? I will sort of reiterate one more time. we have used Laplace transform to transform this initial value problem for this unknown function y in the T domain into an algebraic problem for the Laplace transform of y in the S domain. Now this is an algebraic problem. Earlier we were solving a differential equation. Now we solve this algebraic problem to find Laplace transform of y, right? And we recover the desired function y from its transform, Laplace transform y. Yeah. So this last step is known as the inverting the Laplace transform. So let me sort of complete this example and maybe you would be able to understand what I'm trying to say. Okay. So I'm going to now use partial fractions and write the right hand side as following. I'm going to write down something by s minus 2 plus something. Yeah, please mute yourself. So this is 1 by 3 by s minus 2 plus 2 by 3 by s plus 1. Now, why do I suddenly bring in partial fraction decomposition here? Because of the following fact. See, remember, the right hand side here, I need to write down this as the Laplace transform of something, right? Because I want to recover y here. I want to find out what is y. So remember, the right hand side here is exactly 1 by 3 Laplace transform of exponential 2t. Yeah, remember, this is one of the first examples that we discussed today. And 1 upon s1, s plus 1 is exactly the Laplace transform of exponential minus t, right? So this is saying that the Laplace transform of y is same as 1 by 3 Laplace transform of exponential 2t plus 2 by 3 Laplace transform of exponential minus t, right? Correct? And now I'm again going to use the linearity property of the Laplace transform to write down the right hand side as Laplace transform of 1 by 3 exponential 2t plus 2 by 3 exponential minus tt. And now appeal to Lert's cancellation law to say that y is actually equal to 1 by 3 exponential 2t plus 2 by 3 exponential minus tt. So this is what I said, yeah, recover the desired function y from its Laplace transform. And this last step is called as inverting the transform. Yeah, so you are sort of taking inverse Laplace transform here, right?
Ma'am, but again,
Yeah.
this is again a little bit of guessing because you're guessing ki which Laplace transform is this, like e to the power 2t and e to the power minus t. So
There's
that
no
then,
guess here. See, you have to sort of remember the Laplace transform of some elementary functions. That's all.
but again, then, but same, then we could just solve the ODE other ways. Like
Right. So
we
see,
could
so
solve the, yeah.
for example, in this example, you know, you could have anyway solved it using, for example, the method of undetermined coefficients. But, you know, we will see some examples a little later, which can be solved, which cannot be solved using the tools that we have learned so far, but for Laplace transforms.
Ma'am, I have a question, but it's a little bit long. Shall I tell you now or at the end of the
Maybe
class?
at the end, that would be better.
Okay.
Thank you very much for your understanding. Yeah. See, for
Hello,
example-
ma'am. I have a question.
Yeah, tell me.
Ma'am, why are we implicitly assuming that y is defined from 0 to infinity?
We are assuming that. Yes.
Yes.
And so it turns out, yes.
So isn't that a restriction to Laplace transforms?
Yeah. So this method has obviously some restrictions, but there are some gains to it. See, for example, you know, when we are looking at non-homogeneous equations, so instead of this is a homogeneous initial value problem, right? Instead of this ODE, what if we had a right-hand side, you know, this forcing function R here? See, so far all our methods assume R to be continuous, right? Laplace transform devices gives you a method to, you know, solve even when R is piecewise continuous, and we will see some examples.
And ma'am, one more query I have. Can we
Okay.
apply Laplace transforms to those initial value problem which doesn't involve 0, like y1 equal to 1? Like, can we extend the Laplace concept there?
We will see. We will see what can be done there. Yeah.
Okay.
Just hold on. Yeah.
Ma'am, the y which we have found is for whole real line, right? Not for 0 to infinity.
Say that again. The y which we have found.
The solution which we have found out is is the solution valid for whole real line and not for only 0 to infinity, right?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, ma'am. So it is for whole real line. I was just asking that, right?
See, existence and uniqueness theorem tells us there is anyways a unique solution in a neighborhood of 0, right? We're
Yes.
solving an initial value problem here, right? Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So that's all okay, right? Anything else? Yeah. Any more questions? I'll pause. This is the very first time we have solved an example using Laplace transform. Any more questions?
So, ma'am, what are some of the basic functions of which the Laplace transform should be remembered?
See, we did right in the beginning, right? Constant function, then exponentials,
Yeah.
cosine function, sine functions, sine hyperbolic, cosine hyperbolic. Don't
Okay.
worry, all of this is either in the class or some of them are the tutorials, right? See, as you realize, you'll have to, meaning you can sort of read, right? What is the Laplace transform 1 upon s minus 2, right?
Yes.
Yes,
Got
so
it.
all of that is here, right? So I'll just reiterate one more time. Laplace transform is used here to solve a linear constant coefficient ordinary differential equation. The problem is reduced from a differential equation to an algebraic one. Yeah, and the solution satisfying the given equation initial conditions is automatically found. See, for example, if you had done this, using, let's say, the method of undetermined coefficients. uh, no, this is a homogeneous equation, right? Why would you use undetermined coefficient? So this is a homogeneous equation, right? So if you sort of use the characteristic polynomial to
Operator. Yes.
yes, to then you would have first found this general solution to the homogeneous equation and then plugged in the initial condition, right? A Laplace transform, the method of Laplace transform, you find a solution which satisfies the initial condition automatically, right? And there's one more distinction, as we will see later, that non-homogeneous equations are dealt with exactly the same manner as homogeneous equations, right? In general, what do you do when you have to solve non-homogeneous equation? You find one particular solution of the non-homogeneous equation and you find the general solution of the associated homogeneous equation, right? Whether this is a method of undetermined coefficients or the method of variation of parameter. That's not the case with Laplace transform, as we will see. Yeah. So there are many more advantages. I will highlight them as and when we stumble across them. But this is the very first example that we did. Are there many more questions on this example or this bit okay? Then I'd like to sort of move on. Is this okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right, great. All right. So let's take one more example. Please mute yourself. This time a non-homogeneous ordinary differential equations with initial condition. Yeah, so there's an initial value problem. Okay, let's again take the Laplace transform of this differential equation. I'm going, I've already applied the linearity of the Laplace transform to write L d square y by dt square plus Ly equals to L of sine of 2t. And as before, I'm going to assume that the solution y of this differential equation satisfies all the hypotheses of the corollary that we discussed, right? So which means that y and y prime are continuous on the interval 0 to a. Y double prime is piecewise continuous. You see, all of that is not required because we are solving ODE here, which means that everything is differentiable, nice and differentiable here. And we assume that all possible derivatives of y up to order 1, yeah, y and y prime are of exponential order alpha. Okay. So having made sure that the conditions, the hypothesis of the corollary is satisfies, one can write down the Laplace transform of the second derivative of y in terms of the Laplace transform of y, which means that the left hand side looks like this: s square Laplace transform of y minus s y evaluated 0 minus the derivative of y at 0 plus Ly equal to the Laplace transform of sine of 2t, which we computed in the beginning of this lecture as 2 by s square plus 4. Okay. I'm going to plug in the initial conditions. so that the Laplace transform of y turns out to be this, right? And again, you know, I am going to use the partial fraction decomposition of this. Why do I do that? That will allow me to read the Laplace transform of the right hand side, right? So I'm going to write the right hand side as some constant as plus b by s square plus 1 plus cs plus d by s square plus 4, and I am going to find out what are a, b, c, d. So this is a little competition one can solve, and it so turns out that c is 0 and all of those a, b, d are non-zero, which means that if this calculation is correct, that the Laplace transform of the solution of this initial value problem y is the following, right? So 2s s square plus 1 plus 5 by 3 1 upon s square plus 1 minus 1 by 3 2 by s square plus 4, right? Now at this stage one has to sort of remember this table, or you have to have that table handy with you. Open your book and have that table handy, as to, you know, if I can write down the right hand side as Laplace transform of something, right? So it turns out that the first term here is exactly 2 times the Laplace transform of cosine of t plus 5 by 3 Laplace transform of sine of t minus 1 by 3 Laplace transform of sine of 2t, which means that you apply, you know, the cancellation law, which tells you the Laplace transform of the solution y is exactly the Laplace transform of 2 cosine t plus 5 by 3 sine t minus 1 by 3 sine 2t, which means that the solution is given as follows. Okay, so is this okay? So the Laplace transform, so this is what I meant by saying that the non-homogeneous equations are dealt with exactly the same way as homogeneous equations as far as the method of Laplace transform is concerned. Much unlike the method of undetermined coefficients or the method of variation of parameters that we have discussed in the past. Okay. So is this okay? Is this example okay with everybody present here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes?
Just
Yes.
Will you be provided with the table in the exam also?
See, we'll worry about the exam a little later. Don't worry. But is this example okay? I have not thought
Yes.
about the exam at all. Right? Don't worry about it. See, there are many tutorial problems. Once you solve each of them on your own, you will remember these. There's nothing.
Okay.
It's just like, you know, you remember, you know, each time when you have to differentiate cosine t or you have to differentiate sine t, you don't have to look at table, right? You remember them on top of your head because you have been doing them, you know, so many times. It's much like the same. When you do, you know, some 5 problems, you will remember them. That's all.
Any objective paper, you could use any method. You don't have to use Laplace per se.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on that. But is this example okay? Is this okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
ma'am.
everybody with me up till this point? Okay, great. All right, so what do I have to say next? Let me see. So the next theorem connects the Laplace transform of the integral of f to the Laplace transform of f. Yeah. So let's see, when does all of this make sense? So suppose that f is piecewise continuous on the interval 0 to a for every a positive, and suppose that f is of exponential order alpha, yeah, which means that there are certain constants k alpha m satisfying this inequality. Then it so follows that the Laplace transform of the integral of f from 0 to t exists and is equal to 1 by s Laplace transform of s, right? And all of this is true whenever s is at least alpha, as big as alpha, right? We'll see how this is useful, but let's fix a proof first. So the first thing to note here is the statement of the theorem assumes that the function f is of exponential order, right? It will follow from this assumption that the integral of f is also of exponential order, right? So the existence of the Laplace transform of the integral of f is taken care of. Is that okay? Yes. Okay. All right. So let's fill in the proof. Remember, we need to show that. So we have shown that the left hand side exists. The Laplace transform of the integral of f exists, and the right hand side also exists because f is assumed to be of exponential order. We need to show that the two are the same. All right. Okay. So. So let's see, for simplification, let's assume alpha to be bigger than 0, nothing changes. And I'm going to write this function integral of t, integral of f from 0 to t as g at t. So then I can write this. When can I write this? That the derivative of g is same as the function f. When can I write this?
When f is continuous.
When f is continuous, right? So this is the fundamental theorem of calculus. But over here, we are assuming f to be piecewise continuous, right? So this is true, not always, but this is true except where the function f fails to be continuous, right? And since f is going to be, f is assumed piecewise continuous, so there are only finitely many points of discontinuities of the function f, right? So the derivative of g is equal to f everywhere except at the finitely many points of discontinuities of the function f. All right. So this tells us that the function derivative of g is also, it exists and is piecewise continuous, right? Also, this function is of exponential order, right? Because f is so f is of exponential order. Now I'm claiming g is also of exponential order, right? So this is the first remark that we discussed after this statement of the theorem. So let's consider the following. The Laplace transform of f is same as the Laplace transform of g, derivative of g. Now, see, this equality holds everywhere except at finitely many points, but that's okay. That's enough because here Laplace transform, taking Laplace transform is, taking integrals, and integrals do not distinguish if the values of the function differ at finitely many points. So the first equality here is fine. Now, the Laplace transform of the derivative of g can be written as in terms of the Laplace transform of the function g, right? And g at 0 vanishes. Why? Because this was by the definition. If you plug in t equal to 0 here, then g of 0 is equal to 0. And we're done, right? S times the Laplace transform of g is equal to the Laplace transform of f. Remember that g was nothing but the integral of f evaluated from 0 to t. So we are quite done. Is that okay?
Hello.
Yes, please. Somebody has a question?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ma'am, can you show the theorem statement again, please?
Yes, surely. Here it is.
Yeah, so here it is given that f of t must be of exponential order, but is that
Right.
necessary? Because we only need g of t to be of exponential order, right? Like we have done previously.
See, we also need this right hand side to be defined to begin with, right?
Right. But
Right?
that
Right.
what we had learned was if f is of exponential order, then the Laplacian of f will exist at in some interval of s, right?
Yes.
But uh, the other way need not be true. Like,
Correct.
yeah. So, yeah, that again brings me back to the question that even if f of t is not exponential of exponential order,
See,
as long as g of t is exponential of exponential order, Laplacian effect should also
if
exist.
g of t is of exponential order, that will say that the left hand side is well defined. But how do we say that in order to write down Laplace, I'm writing here Laplace transform of f, right? So this quantity need to be well defined. This conditions make sure that these, both these sides are well defined. That's all.
But
But this is not saying that this holds only if f is of exponential order. If
okay,
f is of exponential, then this is true. See, this is then. If this holds, then this holds. It's not an if and only if statement.
okay, got it.
Correct?
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think I'll just stop right here for today. I'll stop the recording and maybe take your questions. Why do I see this?
Hello, ma'am.
Yes, please.
Huh. So this is something that I've been trying to do. So basically, I have observed that there is a huge connection between like differential equations and linear algebra, right? So like, for example, even Laplace transform